again, Nadine? Claudine?
Slavery by Another Name.
Slavery. Thank you.
It's really hard read, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Bobby, you ready?
I'm ready.
Where do you want to start?
What do you think?
Where were you born?
I was born in.
And how many years ago?
Many, 57. Proud 57.
Yeah, mama.
Yeah, you know what? I think when you get older, you get more comfortable. Like when I passed 55, it was like, oh, I got this. Because with age comes a lot of wisdom. So I was raised in a very conservative area of Northern California. And my thoughts and beliefs were shaped from a very religious type background in a small, close-knit community. And I was raised with beliefs that I still feel are so ingrained within me that I'm always constantly catching myself and learning. And the good thing is I want to learn and grow through it. But we had love in our house. My mom and dad did their best. My dad was an alcoholic. He died of it. And that was some shame and guilt that I carried with me for a long time. And if you come from a alcoholic children household, if you're an adult child of an alcoholic, you don't realize the shame and guilt that you carry with you. On top of all that, you're discovering your sexuality, that you're different. You're different in such a way that everybody around you think you're the only one.
Well, and it was a small town, right?
150, 149 after I left.
150 people or 150,000?
150 people.
It's pretty small.
I lived in the country. I had hardly anybody around me. I didn't have a lot of people around me. We had people, but I mean, we had a big ranch, and I had my dog.
Yeah. All right. So at one point, did you decide you had to get out of that that small town?
Well, I didn't go very far. I went to Chico, which was 3.5 hours down the road. That's where I went to college. And then I started being exposed to different worlds and different things.
Okay.
Chico's
Right.
still a very conservative type city because it's in Northern California. When you get north of Sacramento, it's pretty much conservative. But in a college town, you get that liberal bent. Right. So I was exposed to the arts, and I remember one semester in college, I was part of the guild that would help people whenever we had concerts. And I remember one of my first concerts I got to help people in the seats in the theater was with Ray Charles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and looking back, I didn't realize how significant that was for me.
And what was significant about it?
I was not raised around African-American people.
Okay.
And I just went for his music because I was part of the theater guild. And now I realize, wow, that was such a monumental part of my life to be able to see him sing. But then I'm being exposed to a different world. We were never exposed to that. We were exposed
to... Probably weren't exposed to much. If it was 150 people, just the number itself can't give you much diversity.
Nope. And we had Latino people that worked in the fields.
And I know, this just struck me, we all know 150 is small. Our market center is twice that big. Yeah. Our market center is twice as big as the town Robert grew up in. And
where I grew up there are all these little smaller towns. So the town I lived in was 150. The other one south was maybe 200. The big city of Wairika is about 8,000 to this day.
The big city of Wairika.
We're going to town.
Okay, so I can make a lot of assumptions on what your programming was like then. From
girl.
And I've also got to assume it had to be a little tough as you started to come in, to yourself and awareness. Probably, would you say as early as puberty?
I remember I had 2 twin cousins that came and worked on our farm in the summer. They were from the Bay Area. and their names were Mike and Paul, and they came up for 4 summers to help my dad haul hay. And I was 4, they were 14. And I was in such awe with them that I always wanted to just watch them. And
Not
then,
much has changed.
yeah. And then I was discovering, well, why am I wanting to see Mike and Paul so much? Why did I want to see that? And, then you think, well, something's wrong with me. Maybe I'm not going to tell anybody. So there was 2 closets I was in. You stay in the closet of the alcoholism in your family because the whole community knows. And you'll hear the term, oh, your dad's the town drunk. And so there's a lot of shame and guilt that's carried with that. And then the second closet was my sexuality. Don't tell anybody because I don't want anybody to know. The church says I'm an abomination. I'm going to go to hell. And then you want to hide everything in your life. So I use the closet as a metaphor. The closet is everything we put away that we don't want to everybody be seen, whether it includes clothes, shame, guilt, family issues, sexual abuse, sexuality, gender identity. We'll just put it in the closet. Let's deal with it later.
Or never.
Or never. And that's where I programmed that, well, I'm not going to share my story because I don't want to be authentic. I don't want anybody to know. And I remember in college one time, when I was coming out of my shell, but I had a lady and I was involved in student government very heavily. I ran for vice president of the student body. I did that my very last year. But there was a university liaison that we spent a lot of time with connecting and doing stuff for the student union and stuff. And she said one thing to me that still sticks with me after 35 years. You're a very hard person to get to know. And that's stuck with me since 1984, 85.
And I'll just add, I think that's pretty prevalent in our community because it's scary. You're immediately vulnerable if you let people know who you are.
Yeah. And I wasn't going to be vulnerable because, on top of it, I'm a high D. Go to work, do your stuff. Raising a farm, you just do your work, buckle up, and go to work. Don't complain. I come from a German heritage and Portuguese, and I had immigrant great grandparents that came over, and we just worked.
So, at what point did you start to say, okay, I there is a community that I belong to? I'm not the only one.
So I tiptoed in it in college, and we can go to being 17 years old and joining a youth group, Christian-based youth group. And the person that led the group, his name was Aaron, who was 21 years old, and I'm 17, and he's attempting to figure me out. And I remember that one weekend I was at his house, or one night I was at his house after we all get together and we do our singing and read the Bible. And he kept asking me, so what are you hiding? What are you hiding? And then I divulged to him, I go, I think I like men. And surprisingly, he did too. And he attempted to get me to have sex with him that night. And of course, I freaked out, took off. And then it was a couple weeks later where we ended up having a relationship. Mind you, I'm 17, he's 21. Yeah, in a Christian-based youth group.
Yeah, that's a dichotomy.
So you go hide yourself again and say, okay, this didn't happen. So we ended up about a 1-month relationship, and then I just completely shut it off. And then this was right when I was going to college. So I went to college, and he even followed me to my new college because he was going to the junior college by my house, and he followed me to the college. But I still didn't communicate with him. And then I tiptoed with a few people in college, 2 to be exact. But every time it would be just an incident, and then I'd shut it off. An incident, then I'd shut it off. Like it doesn't exist. And I had a girlfriend my last year of college, and we had sexual relations. And it felt good, but I still wasn't aware of what my true identity or sexuality was about.
Okay.
Then when I moved to San Diego, I kept saying, well, I'm going to go, when you say I'm going to go somewhere and find myself, So I said, where can I go in California and still be as far away from my family, but still be in California? Well,
About as far as you can go.
yeah. And the girlfriend I had at the time was from Carlsbad. So I flew down here prior to me traveling to Europe after college. I went and did a 2-month backpack trip, came to San Diego, fell in love. Okay, this is where I got to live. And then moved down here after Europe. Didn't have a job, just drove down.
When was that roughly?
86,
Okay.
August of 86, a bit more like September. I couch surfed with good friends from college for about 2 months until I figured they got tired of me, and found a place, got a part-time job, got a job, trying to find my establishment. But I started going to this beach called Black's Beach. I'm like, oh, there's naked men there. And I befriended a guy on the beach, and I'm still friends with him to this day. His name is Bill. And I credit Bill for helping me through a very rough period, because I was at that point, I'm like, I don't know if I can make it here. It's hard living in San Diego. It's expensive. It was hard to find a job. Maybe I should just go
Oh,
back to
everything's
the-
relative. 86?
Yeah. But we became great friends, and he took me to my first gay bar.
Were you
Yeah.
putting 2 and 2 together yet, or were you still kind of in self-denial?
Self-denial with him, because we went out to dinner one night, and he never asked. We never talked about sexuality or anything. We just went to dinner, and then after dinner, he said, "Hey, want to go get a drink?" I'm like, "Sure." I'm just thinking, "Sure." And he took me to this one bar called The Escape. It's no longer there. And we go, and it's a small little piano bar where they had drag shows. And
Which I'm sure you'd been to before.
no. And went there, and he said, "Go get a table. I'm going to go to the bathroom." I'm like, "Okay." So I sit down, and I'm looking around. I'm like, there's only guys in this bar. Why are there only guys in this bar? Where are the girls? And he comes back from the restroom, and I asked him, I go, "Is this a gay bar?" He's like, "Well, yeah, I thought you were gay." I'm like, "Oh, well, I don't know." And so I don't know what we talked about. He said, "Well, you want to go to a dance club?" I'm like, "Sure." And it was a place called the Peacock Alley. And we went to the Peacock Alley, and honey, I walked in that door with shirtless men, cute bartenders, everybody in dolphin shorts. If from Child, you know dolphin shorts. And I was like a new kid on the block, new meat on the rack. I was getting attention like I'd never gotten it before. I went back to that bar every night for the next 30 days. And that was my coming out into San Diego. And mind you, I was still living a heterosexual life. I was renting a room from a straight couple in La Jolla. And I would creep out at night and go to this club. And then eventually I started making friends. And those friends became, "Hey, this person has a room to rent. You want to move down there?" So I remember, very pivotal, the day I moved into Hillcrest. It was like February of 87.
For anybody who's not in San Diego at that time and still somewhat now, that's where we all go. Eventually, it seems like every gay person I know has lived in Hillcrest at one point or another.
Yeah. And back then, you didn't say if you live in Hillcrest, you knew you were gay. Now it's very mixed.
Yeah.
But there was a yogurt shop at the corner of 5th and University by the Hillcrest sign. And we were all, after I'd moved in, we all went up for a walk, the group I was hanging out with at that time, and we got yogurt. And I can remember still, my life is transforming and changing. I am moving into a gay community, and I am going to be gay. And so you always have these events that happen that transform you, defining moments. And that was all these defining moments I can still remember to this day.
So at that point, you probably didn't come out to your family right away.
No, definitely not. That took years.
And for context, because we got a lot of kids on this call, what was going on in the overall gay community in the 80s?
So back then, I came out during another pandemic that was affecting and targeting the minority community, the gay community, gay men in particular, also the hemophiliac community, and Haitians. So, but it was labeled the gay plague, and it was called AIDS. And so I came out during that period where the community was, and this was 86, AIDS was first discovered in 81. But so there was a whole 5 years that the community was fighting an epidemic.
And the national government was denying it was a problem, except for in the gay community. So there was no attention paid to it.
No, zero. The president at that time, who I voted for twice, because I was raised a very conservative environment, didn't mention the word AIDS until 1988. Or 86 was when he first mentioned it, I think.
5 years later.
Yeah, so that parallel with that pandemic and this pandemic, there's so many parallels. That's why this pandemic didn't scare me. Like, girl, I already been through AIDS.
Well, and that's just an interesting layer of coming into your own, knowledge of who you are and having that swirl around you. I'm a little bit younger than you, but I remember how scary that was. How did that impact you?
So the impact for me was when I had friends that we discovered had AIDS. Again, there's several closets that gay people go through. They go through the sexuality closet, and then the second closet they enter in is the AIDS closet or the HIV closet. There was a lot of shame and guilt around having AIDS because it was such a treacherous disease. You have men that idolize perfect sculpted bodies, and this disease ravaged them.
Especially in that decade and through most of the 90s.
Mm-hmm. So it was such a dichotomy of worlds and so many things swirling around that there was still a lot of fear for me because I was just coming out and exploring my sexuality and identity. I don't remember having fear, but you would have the nights of, because they say, oh, if you have night sweats or you wake up and it's hot, you've got it. And so every time it was summer and you wake up hot, oh my God, I have it. So the community was just starting to organize and mobilize, and they were talking about safe sex and everything you need to do. And we were coming together as a community to raise money to help charitable causes, AIDS organizations, food banks, delivery services, because the government wasn't stepping up.
There was no support outside of the community.
No.
We really had to come together. And this is going to sound to you and me like a silly question, but I'll ask it. Did you have friends who got AIDS?
So, yes. And it's still raw because I had so many close friends that denied it. They even kept it from us close. We had groups, and one of my friends, Michael, he was 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyes, gorgeous. And my best memory of him is walking into one of our clubs on Sunday Fun Day. It's called Flicks, and they were playing Tina Sinatra, These Boots Are Made for Walking. And to see him tower above everybody and dance to that song is my best memory of him. And then I had Peter, who was a dear friend of mine, who was a school teacher. And all of a sudden, Peter disappeared. And we couldn't find out where he was. Well, he was from Carl's Oceanside, and we found out that he went to live with his parents because he started getting really bad symptoms and had Kaposi sarcoma. So he had all over his body. And then next thing we know, Peter's dead. And then John dies. And then Joe kills himself. And you walk to an event and you see someone 90 pounds. And you just saw him a couple weeks ago and they were healthy as a horse. It happened that quick. And the friends that I made, I can't remember all of them. But I remember their faces, and I remember that they've died. And there wasn't a week that went by that you didn't open the gay newspaper and see an obituary. Who died this week? What funeral are we going to? And again, all that shame that gay people carry with them their entire life for being different because they're gay, now their shame is magnified because of a virus that's killing them and tearing their body apart. And so again, we go
Most
into
of
that.
the outside world saying, and you deserve it, and this is the plague you brought on yourselves. I mean, there was no safe psychological space.
Well, and when it originally started too, it was the lesbian community that originally said, well, can you blame them? They go out, they have sex, they have multiple partners, and they get something. And that was originally the belief. And then it was the lesbian community that stepped up and started helping us. As we were dying, they stepped up and helped us. So there was this coalition in the community, and there's still what I wouldn't call racism, but people not understanding other beliefs, even within the LGBT community. Like they're always at odds with each other, but we're all in the same struggle. And I think what AIDS did to me, AIDS brought the mobilized the community, that got organizations put together that helped, and we call it the gay agenda, but helped progress advances for better treatment for people, better medicine. The AIDS epidemic helped the National Institutes for Health during this crisis right now, because they're able to realize they learned the lessons from AIDS. If we don't do something to control this, the virus does not discriminate. The AIDS is a virus. It doesn't discriminate whether you're gay, straight, black, white, Latin. Same thing with this virus we've learned now. It's not discriminating. It's hitting a certain portion of the community harder, but everybody has an equal opportunity with this virus.
All right, so fast forward, because there's a lot. we could stay there for a while. So fast forward a little bit. When did that start to get better? Your acceptance of yourself and getting through the really rough years of the AIDS pandemic.
So at that time, we didn't have time to worry about our emotions. We were just burying people.
It was just survival.
It was survival mode. So at that point, it was just survival mode. And you stuff your feelings, you stuff your emotions. And I was very good at that, because that's how I was raised. Just stuff it. Don't deal with it. Don't deal with it. And you go through, I had some wonderful relationships in my life. And then I had some relationships that I had a really great growth opportunity with in my life. And I look back on them now as they were great growth opportunities, because every relationship is meant for us to learn something. If we don't learn that lesson, guess what? It's going to show up in someone else. And all these same things kept repeating. I'm like, okay, I'm getting the same lesson. I either need to learn, or I'm going to keep getting it and living that reality.
And typically bigger and badder. The next time the universe gives you the lesson, it's a little more explosive.
Yeah, and so I've learned throughout that I'm very good at stuffing my emotions, my feelings, and just saying, oh, I don't need to share that with anybody. I don't need to be exposed. Now, in the last decade, I've really come to understanding that that's not a good thing. So we go through, I make it through it, the epidemic and the pandemic, and knowing, helping my friends as they transition over, and can't tell you how many memorial services you go to. You're just kind of numb. I'm like, okay, I made this through it. And then it was 1998. That was a pivotal time in my life. I go in for my regular HIV test thinking everything's going to be great. And I found I tested positive. And I was absolutely floored. I'm like, wait a minute. I made through it. I did everything safe. I did everything right. Doesn't make sense. I practiced safe sex. But for me, something internally still needed to be healed. And so I began a 22-year journey of that healing process starting in 1998. And I still have that on my calendar. I call it my rebirth, when I discovered. First time you discover, you go into shock and dismay and you're crying, oh, I'm going to die. Actually, that's when I began to live. I hadn't realized it. I began to live because I now started to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, initially, I went back into another closet because even within the community, there's still discrimination.
And stigma.
The stigma is still there. It wasn't that they intentionally wanted to be that way, but there's a fear. The fear of any pandemic or virus or anything is death, because people come to understand they are mortal beings. And I think people are afraid of being mortal. They think they're going to live forever. And I'm like, no one's getting out of this alive. I don't see anybody that has yet. We're all going to die. And I think that mortality that we all have, when it's front and center, people get afraid. And so with me, the fear of death took a while to get there, but I don't have that anymore. That seemed to be been wiped away. That's why this epidemic, I'm like, I'm not afraid of it.
Well, okay, so in 1998, you get positive test results, and things had progressed, but still wasn't, the medications and everything weren't at the level, obviously, they've come now. So that there had to be some fear of, what am I going to experience? What am I going to go through?
Well, there was 3 years that they developed the cocktail that was life-saving, that started putting people back into health. And although I didn't really understand that, you know, because you still want to remain not knowledgeable in a certain area for safety. I'm like, I don't want to learn about that because I want to stay safe.
Yeah, as if ignorance is safe.
Yeah. And that's where we are right now. We're ignorance in everything that's being revealed. The curtain's being pulled back on so much stuff. Ignorance never helped. So I went through my journey like everybody else. You anesthetized with alcohol and drugs. My drug of choice was pharmaceuticals after I had surgeries or stuff. But it's rampant in the community. Go to a party.
So many people don't know how to process that, right? So the safest thing for survival is to numb it down.
Numbing it is exactly what drugs and alcohol does. Let's not deal with it. Let's just drink it away. Yeah. And that was the big reveal for me when I discovered that and alcohol and drugs never gotten away from me from ever working. So I'm like, well, I'm not an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic because he would drink for weeks at a time. I just drink on a Sunday night and show up to work on Monday. Different levels of alcoholism. And so when I went through that journey, it was 2005 that I just, between 98 and 2005, made a complete wreck of my life. I lost my business that I was before real estate. I broke up with my partner at that time. My dad died. I tested positive and my health was failing. Okay, something needs to be reset. So 2004, I landed with a really good friend at Selling High Rises downtown, Rosemary. And Rosemary had a spiritual connection with all these spiritual teachers. And so I began my path learning from lessons from Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay. And the very first book I ever read on empowerment was by Lynn Grabhorn. And the book is called Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting. And that was a transformational book at that time. And then the next book was Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life, which I had sent to my mom years before because I thought she needed it.
That's awesome.
And discovered it needed to be part of my library. And then in 2006, I got connected with one of the best companies ever on the planet that is more than selling real estate. It's about making the best out of everybody, because how they pour into development for people. And that's it. Keller Williams is not a real estate company. It's a spiritual enlightenment, development, and personal growth company. I mean, it's multi layers in this company. I was still wounded though, and I walked around. Came in with Tammy Willis. We were running that team. We transferred from the El Cajon office. We were at that little India Street office, and here it was you. And Leona, I'm like, who's this crazy lady? She was the broker, OP at the time. And then we had our little mishaps with the MCA, and then entered Julie, my other sister, who now all three of you guys have become lifelong partners and family members. And, it radically transformed my life, helped me change. So, and then in 2007, you saw something in me that I didn't see within myself. And that was, you entrusted me to do this brand new position called the productivity coach. Keller Williams wanted a PC, a productivity coach in every market center across the country. So I was one of the very original first of the 5 or 6 PCs across the US. And that's where I started, because I always wanted to help and give back and help people. And so took on this PC role, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You said, just meet with people.
Nobody did. We needed pioneers, and you were a good pioneer.
Well, it was always a starter with startups or new ventures. That never scared me. I always wanted to see what a startup would be like, or start something new. That's the high D nature. Just get in and do it and figure out along the way. And then
none of us knew then, right, that 2008 would be such a pivotal year in our industry.
Yeah. And so still going through the journey of helping other people, and then we go through the market shift. But it was what the Market Center did for me and Keller Williams did for me was pour into us, with all the training and education. And I really just became a student. And being a lifelong learner, I think, is what has helped bring me to a level that most people in society don't have the opportunity to have. And I think that's where we're sitting today, because it's the education that's going to advance society. And it's teaching people at a very young level about differences at a very early age.
At every age, right? And I think the most important thing we need to do is stay open and willing to realize we don't know everything. We actually might think we know a lot. And I don't care if you're 15 or 65, there's still things you need to be learning.
Well, I look back at what I learned in school. This is where they say it starts, is what you learn as a young kid. Children don't come into this world with racist tendency. They're taught it. And when I'm reading books in grammar school about C. Dick and Jane Runn, and they're all white, and there's no children of color in those books, well, duh. I remember the comic strip that I was so gravitated towards as a young kid was called Nancy. And if you've ever read that comic strip, it's a story about a little African-American girl. But I didn't know she was African-American because they didn't color her dark enough. She still looked white. But that was my favorite comic strip.
All right, so let's go forward a little bit, because the trials and tribulations didn't end when you joined Keller Williams.
No, they just began. So along the journey, I had a few health issues, and a lot of them I have irritable bowel issues. Keep holding stuff in. There's some stuff involved with that I've just discovered why that happens. It's called a hiatal hernia. But anyway, so I suffered a setback health-wise in 2000. Oh, when my dad died, and I tested positive and broke up with my partner, lost my business, had to sell my Mission Hills home. All that within a 2-year period. I also had to have 12 inches of my colon taken out.
Oh,
because, yeah. And I got down to 120 pounds. I still have the picture to this day. And it was pretty frightening. I couldn't eat. And, you know, the body's a interesting machine. It's perfectly designed, but if it's off balance in one area, it's going to throw other areas off. So I was dealing with a health balance because when they put me back together, if you've ever had a surgery, surgeons don't care. They rip you open, pull out what they need to pull out, shove you back together, boom, send you on the road. I kept having these issues with the hernias that were developing and the mesh they used to hold me back in. It kept wanting to come out of my body. So
Just so everybody knows, like literally, he would have the metal come back out. It would work itself out and poke back through the skin.
yeah. So I finally got that fixed. And so I
And
had
I remember that. I mean, that seemed to me years of that mesh issue where you really had some significant
it was all the way up until 2015 when I got it fixed. So I probably had about 15, 16 surgeries. Well, that has that takes a toll on the body. And then the toll for that was really hard because I'm always trying to get myself back in health, get sick, back in health, get sick, in and out of the hospital, this issue, that issue. And then I think that health was what really caused the traumatic brain injury where I had a brain bleed on the left side of my brain in 2014. I had headaches all that year at the office. I kept saying, what is this? Did I drink too much last night? Well, I had a slow progressive brain bleed that dried on the left side of my brain. So that was causing the headache. And then August of that year, I was on a family vacation up in Oregon that I drove up to with a headache really bad. And then they finally, when my sister said, you don't look very good, I think we need to take you to the hospital. So they took me to a hospital in Ashland, Oregon, because we were camping. And they tested for meningitis, no go. They did a CT scan and they find that there's blood pooling on the left side of my brain. So the last thing I remember was being put in the back of an ambulance, my mom in the front, and then I woke up 2 to 3 days later after they did a craniotomy. They cut open the side of the brain, skull, take it off to help eliminate the pressure and get the blood off. And then I woke up in the ICU with tubes and stuff coming out of my head and catheters. And then, okay, I still got some work I need to do, I guess. I had to learn how to walk and talk still. And I would have periods where I couldn't talk because I was having seizures in my brain. And then they're trying to figure out, well, how do we get me back to San Diego? Because I drove up and, you know, the medical insurance wanted me to be in San Diego, but my family's like, he's not traveling. They literally wanted to put me on a plane to fly me back to be cared at Sharp Hospital. But anyway, so that, when I came back.
Well, stay there for a minute because it wasn't like overnight, you know, I'm out of the hospital and I'm in recovery. Julie and I weren't up there, but God, that seemed like eternity to know if you would get back to any kind of normal.
Well, I still not. I just fake it. But I came back to San Diego and I was just at home, not working. You know, my KW family, of course, rallied around me as they always do and always will. And when I came back, it was pretty much about 6 months, but I wasn't back. You know, and you were very gracious. And at that point, you had moved from team leader to OP. Julie was going to be leaving and moving to Canada. And Leona had, she was still broker at that point, but was no longer OP. And there was a new team leader that you had. And when I came back, I was just back because I needed to figure out who I was, where I was. Well, if you've been gone from a market center for 6 months and you come back.
And everything changed.
Everything changed. I was sitting there trying to figure out who I was, but what world am I in? And it was very hard for me to come back into a world I didn't recognize. It wasn't what it used to be because agents move, people change, new people come in. The core people were still there, but it was a complete team leader. I remember sitting in that office with Clarissa just crying. I don't know who I am. I don't know what this is. But that was the impetus of me starting to heal a little bit more. And throughout that time, though, after the brain bleed, I was in the process of getting my stomach fixed, because they had to literally go in and repair and take all the old scar tissue and the mesh that had infected my body and take it out. So August was the brain bleed surgery. And then by January of next year, I was able to get the other surgery taken care of, because I was in the process of doing that prior to the brain bleed. But I had to heal from the brain bleed first. So guess what? Each time I got out of the hospital, they gave me Oxycontin to help with the pain. Because imagine having your head sawn open. And I'm coming back into a world I don't understand. And not only did I get Oxy from the brain bleed doctor, I got Oxy from the stomach doctor. Well, that whole 6 months after that, I've discovered I think I'm addicted to Oxys. Again, drugs and alcohol anesthetize what you don't want to deal with. Let's not deal with it.
So you were, and of course I didn't know this at the time, but you were taking Oxy and chasing it with vodka.
I would enhance it with the vodka. Because at a point, the Oxy quits working. And you need to enhance it with something else. And that's how people move from Oxys to heroin, because the Oxy quits working. So I had a great coach at that point, because you guys still allowed me to be in coaching. I had a transformational coach. And after 6 months being back with her, I finally fessed up with her. And I said, Rita, let me tell you this story, what's really going on. Let's not look at the 135 in the business plan I have. Let me tell you what's going on with me. And I confessed to her. And Rita Mendez saved my life. She asked me the question, defining moment, do you want to die? Because she had had a friend that died from Oxy abuse. And I couldn't give her an answer. Got off that call, and we talked about other stuff, but got off the call, went up and found an agent that I knew was in recovery. We sat in a room and I just bawled. And she's still pivotal in my life, because she helped says, well, here, you need to go here. So I went to an AA meeting, and I was able, because I was looking for the answers. I wanted to get off of this, but the medical community would not give me the answers. They said, no, this is all the doctors will give you, or this is all the medical plan will give you. They literally hand feed it to you. And I finally went to an AA group that says, no, you need to go here, you need to do this, you need to do that. I found the answers. And within 2 weeks, I was in a detox clinic here in San Diego for 6 days, the most horrific experience of my life, but I had to get the oxys out. And I went through that whole program. Ken, I didn't tell anybody. We can't tell anybody this. Keep it quiet. Robert's in a detox center. And then came out and then started the journey of healing. It was still about 6 months before that shit got out of my system. And then you were trying to set me up to be a MAPS transformational coach. And I spoke with them and they said, we need you to do this and this and this. I'm like, okay, I'll go do it. And it was going to get my master prac in NLP. And that NLP course, along with other classes, was where I started putting the pieces together about where I was playing victim my entire life. Everything was happening to me, and it's, you know, oh, woe is me. And that's where we live. We live in this victim mentality, and I still was hiding who I really was. And so that began the journey. Again, lifelong learner. I wanted to learn to figure this out. And when we try and attempt to figure things out, that's where answers started showing up. So I started seeing patterns that I created in my life. And then I learned from those patterns that weren't the healthiest patterns, how to correct those patterns or create better patterns. I want to share this quote because this came across just within the last day. When we deny our stories, those stories define us. But when we own the stories, we can write a brave new ending. And that's from Brene Brown. And so many of us live denying our stories, who we are. And for me now, it's much more about being outspoken and this is me. And don't be ashamed of anything. 57 years old, HIV positive, survived this, a brain injury, the AIDS pandemic. But I'm still me. deep down inside, I have a heart and I love and I care about people and I want the best for them. And I'm
So
willing to make my little change.
I didn't know I'd go here, but where's your book? I'm going to have to hold you accountable. Now that
So
you're
I
doing this
did,
publicly.
through this whole thing, I did write a book, and the publisher says, okay, you have too many personal things in there about your stories with people that are living. And so I got to be careful with that. So I wrote the book, but the book that I wrote was about me healing my inner self. So the book's written. It's a complete book for me. It just can't be published. So I'm working on a different book. And the whole format is about stories. How owning your story will help define your life and create a new story for you.
Okay. So at 57 now, and having gone through a lot of this healing, I think we both know we never really accomplished the full healing, right? It's about the journey of this life.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Well, this pandemic has caused a lot of us, including me, to stop, pause, and reflect. And if you haven't, you've missed the point of the pandemic because we literally were sheltering in place. We were with ourselves and with our thoughts. And we had time to reassess and think. My mission and goal is always, my goal would be to always help people be better versions of themselves. What that looks like, I'm still attempting to figure out. Still attempting to write that chapter. And I've become less worried about it being perfect and more about just doing it and letting the universe carry it out for me. Because if the message is resonating with other people, the universe will do the work for me. We always tend to put square pegs in round holes I got to fix this, I got to have this, I got to do that. It's not going to be perfect. And it doesn't always work that way. So I've learned just to be comfortable and take one step at a time, one day at a time. We learned that in AA. And by the way, I went to AA. I don't continue because I got what I needed. It was a great program. But for me, I'm able to handle it without going to that type of program. It was that inner strength that I'm a lot stronger as a person than I really realized I was. Every experience
Whenever
in
you're
my
numbing
life.
anything, it numbs everything.
Yes. And that's basically what so many people do throughout their life. My family does, is they just numbed the existence they were in. Not only was my dad, but my mom's dad and my dad's dad both died of it too. So we had it in our family. So I had to be careful.
And you brought that up. Again, didn't know I'd go here, but through all of that, how's your family been? How does your family play into that whole journey?
That's a big question. Which part of the journey though?
Well, when did you finally come out to them?
Oh, I came out I was 30, so it would have been 1996. Officially come out.
Okay.
And then the other journey about HIV was in 2004 or 5.
So you had been positive for 6 years without even sharing that with your family.
Might have been 10 years. Yeah, but
It's a
there was
lot to carry on without family support.
yeah. I have great support from my mom and my younger sisters, and my older sister and I, we're on a journey to understand each other, and we're getting there.
Well, the reason I brought that up though, Robert, is because I think for most families, and certainly not all, but the traditional family where they're not dealing with a gay child or an HIV positive child, you get that familiar support through all the rough patches.
Mhm.
And we often don't. We have to go through that with our families of choice, which is just a unique experience. What I saw and I loved is when you had your brain bleed, your family was incredible.
Mhm.
They really.
And here's what I could say about family, especially with coming out as being gay. I didn't come out till I was 30 to my family. And I'm like, well, it took me 30 years to tell them what makes me think that they're going to accept it in a week or a day? No, they have to go through their process as well too, to understand it and how they're going to deal with it. Because my mom's hopes and dreams about having grandkids and a life for me, that parents think about their kids because this is what they envision for their kids. They have to let that go.
Yeah.
And I had to let that go, that they don't have to understand how I am, and they don't have to accept me yet. I will help them get there and be patient. So it's taught me patience. And I think that's a good lesson for this time we're in now too, is if we're, especially a Black Lives Matter movement, the people that don't understand it, you've got to allow them time to get there. And that's only going to go through education and understanding and talking to each other. Where we all sit in our corners, that's not going to do any good.
Yeah.
And say, well, I'm not talking to them then. Well, then nobody's going to learn from each other. Because I came from both worlds, conservative and now huge liberal to some degree. But I have deep-seated beliefs and thoughts that come up sometimes, and I have to catch myself because it's ingrained in my psyche.
And I love you saying that, because we all do. It's just you have the courage to really look at it and go, wait a minute, where did that come from? And does it serve me or the world?
Mm-hmm. I learned something the other day that you don't realize. I follow this psychologist, this kid on Instagram, and he talks about African-American men about being well endowed and why that is a racist belief, because it came from the slave days. It traces back to that, because that's how they would treat the men. And then the women were just properties of the slave owners. There's a whole other story. I'm getting the whole story wrong, but it came from that era. So to say stuff like that, once you go black, you never go back, that's really coming from a thought process all the way back to the slave days. We have a lot of cleansing to do in the world, but the good thing is we've moved into the 2000s. It's a very feminine era. It's the age of Aquarius. We've moved out of the age of 4,000-year-old patriarchy that was ruled by men. And you always look to the heavens right now. The heavens are showing the sequence of events that are laid out anyway. So I'll let you guys know, by 2021, we'll start that beginning. In 2024, we will move through all of this. But it will get a little
right now there's so much tumult, because whenever you have a switch like that, the old regime power energy clings on for its survival.
That's what's happening right now. It'll come back more with a vengeance because it's worried about its own survival.
Yeah.
But the younger generation, the indigo children, they see their things differently. They see a better world, and that's the good thing.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask for any questions, and then if we don't have anybody put questions in there, your last words of wisdom and what we can do to help you.
So what you would do to help me would be to help the world by being better versions of yourself. Taking time to stop and understand somebody else's viewpoint. Walking in their shoes for a little bit before you have judgment on them. I think we will be better people if we take the time to think that we all come from different perspectives, but the only way we're going to get through this is to understand those perspectives. Really being authentic about who you are. We all carry these facades for fear of being exposed. And I think Brene Brown's book that we read as a leadership team really helped, understand that leaders will always hide who they really are for fear of showing their weaknesses. Show your weakness. It's okay.
I think it's one of the very unique aspects of the environment we've created at Metro, and not always a fit for everybody. You're going to be challenged to become that better self and be more and more vulnerable. Mm-hmm.
And, we've had so many people come in and out the doors, and they've all been, to me, everybody is a teacher to me. And I'd like you guys to look at everybody. Well, what am I meant to learn from this person? My coaches get tired of hearing me tell this to them because they'll get frustrated with an agent. And I'll say, okay, what is this thing teaching you? What are you here to learn? Oh, shut up, Robert. Well, if you don't learn it here, it's going to show up someplace else. And I just hope that I was able to share a really, my story, and I hope it helped people today.
Oh, it did. And I'm proud of you, and I thank you for saying yes.
Yeah, a little bit of nerves when you ask, but I'm like, okay, whatever. It's time we share our stories.
Yeah.
We're all vessels of love.
That's a big theme in a lot of stuff that I'm reading right now is there's only two human motivations, and it's fear and love. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, do a self-check on what you're doing, saying, thinking, and is it coming from fear or love?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I choose love.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard. My sisters will text me, can you believe she put this on Facebook? I'm like, I go and just love them anyway. Yes, Robert.
Well, when we don't, we forget that we've had a couple moments of imperfection.
Oh, totally. Yeah, foot in the mouth.
All right. Well, thank you. This may have been my favorite conversation out of the 40 we've done.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing.
All right.
All right, buddy. Have a great weekend.
I'll see you at lunch.
Oh, are you going to lunch? Absolutely.
I have to put clothes on. Today, finally.
Yeah. All right. See
All
you
right.
in a couple hours. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a great weekend.